I lost my daughter on a cruise ship at 16. They said she went overboard. I buried an empty casket and 6 years of unbearable grief. When I finally gathered the courage to travel again to try living instead of just surviving, I saw someone who made my world collapse. My heart stopped beating. In that instant, everything I thought I knew about loss shattered. Before we begin, I want to know, where are you watching from right now? Comment below. I read every single one. My name is Ronald. I was 53 years old when everything fell apart, and this is the story of how I lost everything. Most people would say my life looked good on paper. I had a wife I loved, Nancy. We had a beautiful daughter, Laura, who was 16 at the time. I had a steady job. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We had those quiet Sunday mornings where Nancy would make pancakes, and Laura would sit at the kitchen table, sketchbook in hand, drawing whatever caught her eye. Those moments felt like everything. Then everything stopped. 1 year ago, exactly 1 year, I came home from work to find our neighbors sitting with Laura on our front porch. They wouldn't look at me. That's when I knew. Before anyone said a word, I knew. Nancy had an aneurysm. A blood vessel in her brain had ruptured without warning. No symptoms, no warning signs. One moment she was alive, and the next she was gone. Just like that. No goodbyes. No last words. No chance to say the things you always think you'll have time to say. Being a single parent to a grieving teenager is a special kind of hell. I worked, I came home, I tried to be present. I made dinner, asked about her day, pretended I knew what I was doing, but the truth is I was drowning. Every night after Laura fell asleep, I'd sit in the dark of our living room and think about all the moments I'd wasted. All the times I'd come home tired and distant. All the conversations that went unsaid because I was too caught up in my own life. The worst part wasn't the grief itself, it was the regret. The endless loop of what-ifs and if-onlys. If only I'd been home 5 minutes earlier. If only I'd kissed her goodbye that morning. If only, if only, if only. That's when something shifted inside me. When the noise finally went quiet enough to hear my own voice. I'd been hiding who I was my entire life. It wasn't until I was alone that I realized the truth about myself. I'd married Nancy because I loved her, I really did. But I'd also married her because that's what you do when you're a man who doesn't fit into the boxes society built for you. You find a good woman, you build a normal life, and you bury the part of yourself that doesn't belong. For 25 years, I did exactly that. But grief has a way of stripping away the lies. When I lost Nancy, I didn't just lose a wife. I lost the person who made the pretense feel worth it. And suddenly, I couldn't hide anymore. I started going to a support group. Not a group for grieving widowers, though that's what they thought I was. I was there because I needed to be around other people who understood what it felt like to be broken, to be alone. To be discovering yourself at an age when most people thought they already had it figured out. And then I met Justin. He was 38, confident, beautiful, in a way that made you forget to breathe. He came into our lives like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He was attentive kind, interested in every detail of my life. He asked about my work, remembered things I'd mentioned in passing, made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in decades. He was beautiful and charming, and he made the loneliness stop. Within months he moved in. Within a year I married him. I thought I'd finally found happiness again. I was so wrong. From the moment Justin stepped into our lives, I should have seen it. I was too caught up in my own happiness to notice the way he angled himself toward Laura, how he asked about her drawings with genuine curiosity. But I was too relieved to finally have someone who understood me. He knew exactly how to make her feel heard, special, adult. That's the thing about predators. They don't announce themselves. They arrive as listeners, as the person who finally gets you when nobody else does. For a lonely teenage girl who just lost her mother and had a father too exhausted to see her, Justin was exactly that. He'd ask Laura about her art, really ask. He'd sit with her sketches asking why she chose that color, what it meant to her. Nobody had paid that much attention to Laura before, not me. I was working 60-hour weeks, coming home too tired to do more than heat up dinner and collapse into bed. Justin made time for her in a way I couldn't. Slowly, imperceptibly, he became more important to her than I was. I'd come home and find them in the living room, Laura showing him her latest work. Her whole face lit up in a way it hadn't been since Nancy died. I was relieved. Finally, something was making my daughter smile. It never occurred to me that he was connecting with her in exactly the right way designed to make her trust him completely. Then came the private conversations. Texts that made her laugh, her phone face down on the table, as if she had something to hide. I asked about it once, and she said he was helping with art stuff. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband. He was supposed to be trustworthy. But I was too busy to verify, too tired, too grateful that someone else was taking care of her emotional needs. By the time Laura turned 16, something fundamental had shifted. She didn't want to hang out with me anymore. Movie nights became awkward. She spent more time in her room. And when she was downstairs, she was looking for him, waiting for his car to pull into the driveway, perking up the moment he walked through the door. I should have recognized the signs. I should have known what it looked like when someone was falling. But I was so grateful my daughter wasn't drowning in grief anymore, I mistook it for healing. One November evening, I came home early. I found them in the kitchen. Laura was showing Justin something on her phone, and he had his hand on her shoulder. His posture, the way he was leaning in the intimacy of the moment, something felt wrong. Then he kissed her. It was quick, barely a second, his lips touching the top of her head. But the way Laura looked up at him with complete surrender, complete devotion, told me everything. I'd seen that look before. It was the look of someone who'd learned that their job was to be perfect for another person. It was the look of someone who'd already started disappearing. Laura was completely under his spell. March 8th, 2018, we boarded the Carnival cruise. Something felt off the moment we stepped on that ship. It wasn't anything I could point to, specifically no single red flag that would make sense to someone else. But there was a tension in the air, a heaviness that seemed to follow us from the moment we checked into our cabin. Laura moved through the hallways like a ghost. Her usual spark dimmed. She'd always loved traveling, loved the idea of adventure, but this felt different. This felt like something she'd agreed to under duress. I told myself it was grief. 3 months had passed since Nancy died, and cruise ships are supposed to be fun, family-oriented places where you make memories. Maybe the weight of this trip being here without Nancy trying to rebuild what we'd lost was just too much for Laura to carry. Justin, on the other hand, was the opposite of tense. He was calm, purposeful. He moved through the ship like he owned it, planning activities, suggesting restaurants, charming the staff. He seemed energized by the space, by the isolation of being at sea with nowhere to escape. Looking back, I understand now that this was intentional. He was enjoying the setup, the trap. The first few days were a blur of dinners I didn't want to eat and activities I suggested to try to force normalcy back into our lives. I'd book a shore excursion and Laura would find a reason not to go. I'd suggest we play mini-golf as a family, and she'd say she wanted to sleep. The excuses were reasonable. What teenager wants to spend quality time with their parents? But they stung in a way I hadn't anticipated. What hurt more was watching Laura gravitate toward Justin instead. I'd find them on the upper deck, her head on his shoulder, as they watched the water. I'd see them in the dining room, Justin leaning close, as he whispered something that made her laugh. They had an ease with each other that didn't include me, a language I couldn't speak, a bond I couldn't break. I tried to convince myself this was fine, good even. She was bonding with her stepfather, she was moving forward, but something in my gut told me it wasn't that simple. On our 4th day at sea, Laura barely came to dinner. Justin said she was tired, that she wanted room service, that teenagers needed space. So I let her have it. I let him convince me that my concern was overprotective, that my worry was suffocating her growth. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because the alternative that something was deeply fundamentally wrong was too terrifying to consider. By the 5th day, Laura had stopped pretending. She didn't join us at all. She avoided me in the hallways. When I'd knock on her cabin door, she'd claim to be asleep or busy with schoolwork. Justin would put a hand on my shoulder and tell me to give her time, that pushing her would only push her away further. So I backed off. I gave her space. I trusted him. That night I lay in bed wondering what was wrong. Why my daughter looked at me like I was a stranger. Why she couldn't meet my eyes. Why every conversation had become a minefield. But I was about to find out the hard way. March 12th. Everything changed that night. March 12th, 2018, 3:47 a.m. I woke up, something was wrong. The kind of wrong that doesn't announce itself with noise or violence. It's a feeling, a sixth sense, the absence of something that should be there. Laura's breathing from the other bed, the small sounds teenagers make when they sleep, the rhythm of her being in the room with me. I reached over and felt her mattress, cold, empty. Panic doesn't creep in slowly, it floods, it consumes. It erases everything else until all you can do is move, search, call out into the darkness. I stumbled out of bed, my heart already racing, and checked the bathroom. The hallway. The common areas we'd been assigned. Nothing. Nobody. By 4:10 a.m. I'd alerted ship security. By 4:20 a.m. I was screaming her name into every corridor of the Carnival Destiny, my voice cracking in a way I'd never heard before. Crew members scattered, radios crackled. The calm, organized world of the cruise ship became chaos. Where was my daughter? Justin appeared in the hallway, fully dressed. Awake. When I'd been asleep just moments before, he was already up, already looking. Or so he said. He moved through the ship with an eerie calmness, helping security search, suggesting places she might be. His composure was almost professional, almost rehearsed. I didn't have the mental capacity to question it then. I was too busy searching, too busy imagining the worst. At 6:33 a.m. someone found her phone. Deck 7, by the railing. The screen was cracked. No sign of disturbance beyond that. Just a phone abandoned as if its owner had simply let it fall, or had been made to let it fall. That's when the whispers began. The crew members looking at each other with understanding. The unspoken conclusion she'd gone overboard. By 9 a.m. the search was called off. The captain made an announcement. A passenger had been reported missing, presumed deceased. In the time it took for the ship to stop searching, my daughter had crossed from missing to dead in the official record. I remember the captain's words, formal and distant. We extend our deepest condolences to the family. Every precaution has been taken. Unfortunately, in such circumstances, recovery is unlikely. Unlikely, as if there was still hope, as if we were discussing the possibility rather than my entire world ending. Justin stood beside me through all of it, his hand on my shoulder, his voice appropriately grieving. She was depressed, he told security. She'd been distant since her grandmother died. I tried to help her, but she wouldn't let me in. I should have seen the signs. He performed grief with the precision of an actor who'd rehearsed his lines 1,000 times, and I was too broken to notice. By afternoon, we were heading back to Miami. The official report was filed. The investigation was closed before it even really began. One teenage girl, one night, one phone by a railing. Case solved. The captain said my daughter was gone, presumed dead. The paperwork was processed. The death certificate was signed by people who'd never met. Her never knew her, never saw the way she lit up when she was creating art, or the way she laughed when something genuinely amused her. My daughter, gone. March 24th, 2018, the memorial service. The funeral was the worst day of my life, until 6 weeks later. Greenwood Cemetery, South Atlanta. An empty casket beside my mother's grave. Nothing to bury, just paperwork that said she was gone. Sharon held me up as we walked to the grave. My sister. The only person who understood what it meant to lose this family, one by one. First Mom, then Nancy, then Laura. The screaming started at the graveside. I didn't recognize the sound coming out of me. It was primal, like something was being torn from my chest. 3 months of holding it together shattered in that moment. I collapsed on the ground next to that empty casket, screaming, "She's not in there, she's not in there," because I knew somehow that something didn't add up. The phone by the railing, the timeline, Justin's strange calmness during the search, but I was too broken to question it. Justin stood beside me through it all, the perfect grieving husband. Nobody questioned him. Nobody looked twice. 6 weeks of him being present, taking care of everything while I sat in the dark. 6 weeks of me being grateful. Then in late April he packed his bags. "I can't do this anymore," he said. His voice was cold, final. "I need to leave. I can't stay in this house. I can't keep drowning in your sadness." I didn't understand. He was my anchor. "Where will you go?" I asked. "My lawyer will send the papers," he said. I got on my knees literally on our kitchen floor and I begged him. My voice shattered as I spoke. "You're all I have left of her. Please, please don't leave me alone with this." For a moment something crossed his face. Guilt, maybe. But then it was gone, replaced by something colder. He picked up his suitcases and walked out the door. The paperwork was efficient. No negotiation. He wanted nothing. He just wanted out. Fast. Like the place was on fire. But even through the fog, something nagged at me. The timing. The way he'd taken nothing but his clothes. It was too clean. Too planned. I didn't have the capacity to question it then. I was too busy trying to survive. Too busy barely existing. But later, when I could think clearly, I'd start asking questions. I'd discover things that didn't quite add up. Things about his finances, his timing, his movements before the cruise. things suggesting he'd planned something far longer than I imagined. For now, all I knew was that I was alone. 6 weeks after burying my daughter, my husband left me, and I had no idea what else I was about to lose. The next 6 years were a blur of pain. 6 years of learning to breathe, 6 years of learning to live. I don't remember most of 2018. Months blended into one long gray stretch of survival. Waking up was the hardest part. That moment between sleep and consciousness where I'd forget for a split second that my daughter was gone. Then reality would crash back and I'd remember all over again. July 2018. I took too many pills. The doctor said I just wanted one night where I didn't see her face every time I closed my eyes. 72 hours in a psychiatric hold. Janelle moved in after that. Just until you get back on your feet, she said. But how do you get back on your feet when you have nowhere to stand? I started medication. Real medication. A cocktail that slowly, incrementally made the mornings less unbearable. Not better, just less impossible. Therapy became my anchor. Dr. Walsh twice a week. At first, then 3 times when things got bad. She didn't push, didn't rush, just asked questions. August brought a support group. Parents of lost children meeting in a church basement on Thursday nights. I didn't want to go. Janelle practically dragged me there. But in that room full of broken people, I found understanding. These people didn't tell me it would get better. They just sat with the pain. That's where I met Magnus. He'd lost his son 5 years earlier. Magnus didn't try to make me feel better. He just showed up. We started getting coffee after meetings, then phone calls at 2 a.m. when the nights got too long. You're allowed to survive this, he told me once. Surviving doesn't mean forgetting, it just means breathing. The years accumulated, different medications, different jobs. I left psychology entirely, couldn't handle being around families anymore, took administrative work instead, things that required nothing from me emotionally. But somewhere in that gray stretch, something shifted. 2020 came with its own devastation, the world shutting down, and somehow that made sense. Everyone was broken. Everyone was barely holding on. I fit right in. I started asking questions I'd been avoiding, about myself, about who I actually was underneath all the performance. I'd been hiding who I was my entire life. But in the quiet of a pandemic, with nothing but time and pain, I finally started to accept the truth. I was a gay man. I'd been a gay man my whole life. I'd just spent decades trying to be someone else. By 2022, I was different. Not healed, but different. Stronger in the broken places. Panic attacks came less frequently. I could sit through a meal without falling apart. I could think about Laura without screaming. And then one day in 2023, I made a decision. I'd spent 5 years moving through the world like a ghost, but I was tired of surviving. I needed to actually live. I want to take a trip, I told Janelle. Somewhere warm, somewhere I can remember what it feels like to be alive. She smiled for the first time in years. November 18th, 2023. I booked a flight to Puerto Rico. I had no idea that trip would change everything. November 18th, 2023. Old San Juan Market, 4:37 p.m. I was walking through the stalls, watching vendors haggle over fruit prices when I saw her. At first, I didn't recognize her. The girl in front of me was a woman now 21 years old, with hair falling past her shoulders, wearing a simple blue dress. But then she turned, and I saw it. The birthmark on her left wrist, the exact same one I'd kissed 1,000 times when she was a baby. My hands trembled. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would explode. It was her. After all these years, my little girl, Laura. She was holding a small boy's hand, maybe 4 or 5 years old. He had her eyes, dark and watchful. Next to them stood a little girl, no more than 2, clinging to Laura's leg. Both children had her face, her expressions. My grandchildren. I had grandchildren I'd never met. And then I saw him. Justin walked up behind them carrying a bag of mangoes. He put his arm around Laura's waist and kissed the top of her head, the same gesture I'd seen him do 1,000 times before. Laura leaned into him, comfortable, familiar. She didn't pull away. She didn't seem afraid. She seemed content. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. This wasn't possible. Laura was dead. I'd buried her. I'd spent 6 years mourning her therapy sessions, dissecting her memory support group meetings, where I'd talked about losing my only child. I'd accepted it. I'd moved on. I'd learned to live again. And now she was standing 20 feet away from me, very much alive, very much with him. Our eyes met across the marketplace. For one split second, everything stopped. Her face went white. She saw recognition on my face, and I saw it on hers too. Guilt, shame, fear, all of it flashed across her features in an instant. She grabbed Justin's arm, said something urgently in his ear, and they started moving toward the exit. "Laura!" I whispered, but she couldn't hear me over the market noise. I followed them out of the stall area, my legs moving on autopilot. They walked quickly toward a weathered pickup truck parked on a side street. Justin opened the passenger door for her, and the children moving with purpose. He knew something was wrong. He kept glancing at Laura, then toward the marketplace. I stayed back, pretending to browse the street vendors' paintings, but my eyes never left them. The truck pulled away, heading out of Old San Juan toward the residential areas. I got into my rental car and followed at a distance, my mind reeling. Every turn they made, I made. Every light they stopped at, I waited behind them. They drove for 15 minutes, leaving the busy tourist areas behind. The roads became narrower, dustier. Lush tropical vegetation crowded both sides of the street. We passed smaller houses, family-owned shops, places tourists never saw. Finally, the truck slowed and turned onto a narrow dirt road. At the end of it sat a small yellow house with a front porch and flowering vines climbing up the walls. I followed their truck to a small yellow house at the end of the dirt road. I spent the next few days watching that yellow house. From a rental apartment nearby, I observed their routine. Every morning at 7 a.m., Justin backed the truck out of the driveway. By evening, he'd return. Laura managed the household hanging laundry, taking Noah and Amelia to the park buying groceries. She moved through her life like someone sleepwalking. There was a heaviness to her, a sadness that clung to her like humidity. By Thursday, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I called Sharon that evening. My sister had been my anchor through everything: the funeral, the betrayal, the endless therapy. I told her I'd found Laura. She wanted to come with me, but I said no. This had to be between me and Laura first. "Be careful," Sharon had said. "Please, Ronald, be careful." The morning was humid and bright. I walked to the yellow house and stood on the porch, my hand raised to knock. Then I did. 3 hard knocks. The door opened slowly, and when Laura saw me, her entire body went rigid. Shock, disbelief, recognition all crashed into her at once. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes widened so completely, I thought they might break. She looked like the 16-year-old girl I'd lost, but aged by something far darker than time. The sight of me standing there seemed to physically wound her. She stepped backward as if pushed, her knees nearly buckling. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, my voice cracking. "It's me, it's Dad." She didn't speak. She just stared, her eyes filling with tears. "Can I come in?" She stepped back mechanically. Noah and Amelia watched from the kitchen doorway as I entered. Laura closed the door behind me. We sat on a worn couch. Her hands trembled in her lap. "I saw you at the market," I said. "I followed you here." She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning." Laura finally looked at me. Her eyes were devastated, ancient with guilt. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." And then she told me about Justin's manipulation, how he'd isolated her on that cruise, made her feel like he was the only person who truly understood her. How he'd convinced her to disappear, let me think she was dead. She was so young, so desperate to belong to someone, so eager to be treated like an adult. "He said nobody would understand us," Laura whispered. "He said if I told you, you'd keep us apart. The grooming, the coercion, the fear." She explained how once they were in Guatemala and Belize, she realized what had happened. But by then it was too late. She had children with him. She was trapped in a prison of her own making. Every time she thought about reaching out, Justin reminded her of what she'd done. The fraud, the conspiracy, the lies. He'd convinced her that if she tried to go back, she'd go to jail, that I would never forgive her. "I was just a kid, Dad," Laura said, her voice breaking. "I didn't understand. I thought he loved me. I thought I was special. I was so naive, so easy to manipulate." She wept, gasping, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. I pulled her toward me, and she collapsed into my chest. For the first time in 6 years, I held my daughter. I held the girl who'd been stolen from me, groomed and coerced, and trapped in a cycle of lies and fear. I held her while she cried for everything she'd lost: her childhood, her family, her innocence, her freedom. "I've got you," I whispered. "I've got you now. I'm here." We sat like that for a long time. The afternoon light shifted across the living room floor. Noah and Amelia played quietly in the other room. But we both knew this wasn't the end. Justin was coming home. The afternoon stretched on. Laura made lunch. We sat together, and for a moment it felt almost normal, almost like we might actually heal from this. Then at 6:15 p.m. I heard it, the sound of the truck pulling into the driveway, the engine cutting off, the driver's side door opening and closing. I heard the truck pulling into the driveway. My heart stopped. Everything I'd waited for over 6 years came down to this moment. When Justin walked through that door, his face went pale. He saw me sitting on the couch next to Laura, and for a split second he looked like a man whose entire world was collapsing. "Ronald," he said, his voice careful, "what are you doing here?" Laura stood up, trembling. "Dad found me at the market. He followed us home." Justin stepped toward Laura, and I saw something I hadn't expected to see: genuine concern. He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. When he looked back at me, his eyes were filled with dread and resignation. "We need to talk," I said quietly. "All of us." They sat together on the couch. Noah and Amelia played in the other room, their voices a distant hum. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The weight of 6 years hung between us like a living thing. Then Justin did something unexpected. He started to cry. "I know what I did was wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "I know I destroyed your life. I've lived with that guilt every single day for 6 years. I didn't respond. I waited. Laura wasn't supposed to happen the way it did." He continued, looking at her. "I never planned it. But when it did, when she came to me that night, on the cruise, scared and alone, I thought I could protect her. I thought I could love her and make her happy." "By lying to Dad?" Laura said softly. "By making me disappear?" "Yes," Justin said, meeting her eyes. "And that was the biggest mistake of my life. Not because of the lie itself, but because I've watched you suffer for it every day." He turned to me then, and I saw the breakdown of a man confronting his own destruction. "Ronald, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for grooming your daughter. I'm sorry for manipulating her. I'm sorry for stealing your family and for the pain I caused you. I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway." "When I asked, why really? The line, the isolation, all of it?" Justin was quiet for a long time. "Because I was afraid of losing her, afraid that if anyone knew what we had, they'd take her away from me. So I built walls. I made sure she couldn't reach out to you. I convinced her that you'd destroy us." His voice cracked. "But the walls I built became a prison for her, for all of us." Laura began to cry. "I loved you," she whispered, "but I also hate you for what you took from my father." "I know," Justin said, "and you have every right to." I found myself speaking before I'd decided what to say. "Do you still love her?" "Truly," Justin didn't hesitate. "Every single day. That's what makes this so unbearable. I love her, and I've hurt her in ways I can never fully repair." Laura looked at me, her eyes searching. "What do you want to do, Dad?" I looked at my daughter, the woman she'd become. I looked at the man who'd hurt our family so deeply. I looked at Noah and Amelia playing in the next room, children innocent in all of this who deserved a life without this shadow. And I made a choice. "I want to forgive," I said quietly. "Not because what you did was okay, not because the pain goes away, but because staying angry won't bring back the years I lost. It won't heal Laura. It won't give Noah and Amelia the chance to know their grandfather." Justin looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. "I forgive you," I said, "and I'm asking you to do better for Laura, for your children, for yourself." Laura reached over and took my hand. Then she took Justin's. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Trust doesn't return overnight. But something shifted that night. Justin sought therapy. He started attending support groups. He began the long, difficult work of understanding what he'd done. Laura and I rebuilt our relationship piece by piece. She told me stories about Noah and Amelia. I told her about the 6 years I'd survived without her. We cried together. We laughed together. One afternoon, Noah asked me to push him on the swing at the park. Amelia fell asleep on my shoulder, her small hand clutching my shirt. In that moment, I understood something fundamental. Love doesn't erase pain, but it transforms it. I've accepted who I am now, a bisexual man who lost everything and found his way back to his family. A father learning that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing a person can do. Ronald, Laura, Justin, Noah, and Amelia were broken in different ways. But we're trying. We're learning how to be a family. Again, not the way it was, but in a new way. Sometimes the only way to heal is to face the truth, no matter how painful. Was it justice or just another tragedy in a life full of them? I still don't know, but I know this: we found a way forward, a way to heal. Looking back at my story, I realize how many mistakes I made, how many warning signs I missed, If I could talk to every parent watching this, I'd say, don't be like me. Don't ignore the red flags. Don't trust blindly. Don't let love make you blind to manipulation. This is a true story about grandpa stories, the ones we don't usually tell. These grandpa stories matter because they're real. They show us the dark side of love, the consequences of trusting the wrong person, the cost of silence. But here's the lesson God taught me through all of this. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to move forward. It's about protecting the people you love while still finding compassion for those who've hurt you. Don't repeat my mistakes. Watch for signs of grooming in your own families. Ask the hard questions. Protect your children fiercely. And when the time comes, find the strength to forgive. Not for them, but for yourself. These grandpa stories, these true story moments, they remind us that healing is possible, that second chances exist, that broken families can become whole again. If this true story resonated with you, if you've experienced something similar, I need you to comment below. Share your thoughts. Share your own stories. Let's break the silence together. And please subscribe to this channel for more grandpa stories that matter, more true stories that heal. Because every story deserves to be heard.